It's breakfast, the waffle breaks in half on their plate, and just like that, the whole morning implodes. Tears, screaming, the fork goes across the table. Timeout assumes your child won't do the right thing. 40 years of research says they can't, yet. And treating it as won't is what keeps the behavior looping. And the most famous story in the field, the one developmental psychologists have been telling for 4 decades, starts with a broken waffle. If you've ever put your toddler in timeout and watched them come out and do the exact same thing 30 seconds later, you're not alone. It's the single most common discipline tool we reach for with under fives, and it feels like it should work. You remove attention. You give them time to think. They reset. They come back better. That's the theory. But 40 years of clinical research, Ross Greene at Massachusetts General Hospital, Ed Tronick, Dan Siegel, Tina Payne-Bryson, plus a 2016 meta-analysis of 75 studies and 160,000 children from Elizabeth Gershoff, keeps landing on the same conclusion. For most children under 5, timeout doesn't teach what we think it teaches. It just pauses the behavior without changing anything underneath. And the reason why is actually a really specific, fixable misunderstanding that almost every parent makes. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And the fix, which I'll walk you through at the end, takes about 90 seconds and can be done during a completely calm moment. There are 3 things I want to walk you through. First, the won't versus can't reframe, which is the central idea from 40 years of Ross Greene's clinical work. Second, what's actually happening in a young child's brain when you send them away to think, and why the research is surprisingly split on this. And third, the exact 3-step conversation to use instead, which you do when your child is calm, not during the meltdown. By the end, you'll see that the behavior you've been punishing is almost always downstream of a tiny, specific skill your child doesn't have yet, and you'll know exactly how to teach it. Let's start with the first one, the reframe. Ross Greene is a clinical psychologist who spent his career at Massachusetts General and Virginia Tech, treating what the field used to call explosive children, kids whose meltdowns seemed completely out of proportion to the trigger. And after decades of clinical work and publishing the book The Explosive Child, now in its 6th edition, he landed on one sentence that has reorganized how the best developmental clinicians think about young child behavior. The sentence is this: kids do well if they can. Not kids do well if they want to. Not kids do well if we make the alternative uncomfortable enough. Kids do well if they can. Which means, if they're not doing well, the most likely explanation isn't motivation. It's that a specific cognitive skill they would need to do well is not yet built. Flexibility, frustration tolerance, problem solving, the ability to shift gears when a plan changes. These are not skills you are born with. They sit in the prefrontal cortex, which is the last part of the brain to mature, with significant development continuing into the mid-20s. So when a 3-year-old melts down because the waffle broke, it's almost never because they've decided to manipulate you. It's because a tiny specific skill, the skill of rolling with a small disappointment, isn't online yet. When we respond with a consequence, we're treating a skill gap like a willpower gap. The child didn't lack willpower. They lacked the skill, so the consequence doesn't build anything. The skill stays missing, which means the next time a waffle breaks, or a shoe is on the wrong foot, or the blue cup is in the dishwasher, the exact same meltdown happens. Punishment can't teach a missing skill. Only teaching can teach a missing skill. A child who won't is making a choice. A child who can't is missing a skill. From the outside, it looks identical. Underneath, it is a completely different problem, and it needs a completely different fix. Which brings us to the part that's a little more uncomfortable. What's actually happening in a young child's brain when you send them to their room, and why the research on timeout itself is more nuanced than Instagram makes it out to be. On to the second piece, what timeout actually does. In 2003, Naomi Eisenberger ran an fMRI study at UCLA that changed how neuroscientists thought about social pain. She put people in a scanner and had them play a simple ball-tossing video game with what they thought were 2 other players. Partway through, the other players stopped passing them the ball. Just exclusion. The part of the brain that lit up was the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, which is the same region that activates during physical pain. The paper's title was literally, Does Rejection Hurt? And the answer was, CMA. Neurologically, yes. Social exclusion registers in the brain a lot like a stubbed toe does. Now, for an adult, you can hold that pain and still think. You have a fully mature prefrontal cortex. You can reason about what just happened. A 4-year-old sent to their room in the middle of a meltdown does not have that. Their upstairs brain, the Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson phrase, isn't online yet. So what they're getting isn't quiet reflection time. What they're getting is social pain, delivered without the cognitive tools to process it. And they learn one thing. When big feelings come up, the people I love withdraw. Which is why, for a lot of young kids, the meltdown right after timeout is bigger than the one before it. That said, and this is important to be honest about, the research isn't unanimous here. Robert Larzoleri's work, and a 2019 review by Dads and Tully published in The American Psychologist, make the case that a brief, warm, calmly delivered timeout, paired with reconnection afterwards, can be part of effective discipline. A 2024 British Journal of Psychiatry review ran the numbers and found that most of the behavior change signal wasn't coming from the timeout itself. It was coming from parental warmth. Which is the key insight. Timeout isn't the mechanism. The relationship around it is. And if the relationship isn't doing the teaching, timeout by itself isn't doing the teaching either. The research keeps pointing at the same thing. It's not whether a pause happens. It's what happens around the pause, the warmth, the reconnection, the teaching, that changes behavior. And the third piece? The 3-step conversation. This is Greene's collaborative and proactive solutions model. In clinical trials with children who had oppositional defiance, this approach produced clinically significant improvement in 60% of children, compared to 37% for standard parent management training. And the method itself is 3 steps. You do this when your child is calm. Not during the meltdown. During the meltdown, you sit near them. That's it. This conversation happens later, when the upstairs brain is back online. Step 1, empathy. You say something like, I've noticed it's really hard when the waffle breaks in the morning. What's up? Then you actually listen. Don't lecture, don't fix, don't explain. Just find out what the problem looks like from inside their head. For a 3-year-old, the answer might be, I didn't know what to do. That's gold. That's the skill gap. Step 2, share your concern. 1 sentence, calmly. My worry is that when we scream and throw things, someone might get hurt, or we're late for school. Just name it. Don't build a case. Step 3, invitation. I wonder if we could think of something that works for both of us. Then you brainstorm together. For under 5s, you'll mostly generate the options. Maybe we check the waffle before we bring it to the table, or maybe we ask for help if it breaks, and they pick one. What's being built in that conversation is the skill of pausing and choosing. That's the missing thing in the meltdown moment. You're not teaching it during the meltdown. You're teaching it before the next one. And then when the waffle breaks tomorrow, there's a plan. There's a ladder down from the cliff. Here's the reframe once all 3 pieces sit together. What you've been calling defiance is almost always a missing skill. What you've been treating with removal, with timeout, with losing screen time, with sticker charts, doesn't build the skill, because punishment can't teach what isn't there. And the thing that actually builds it is a 90-second conversation you have when your child is calm, not when they're exploding. This doesn't mean you never use a pause. Sometimes a pause is what a child's nervous system needs. If you use one, keep it short, keep it warm, stay physically close, and follow it with reconnection and a conversation when everyone's regulated. But the conversation is doing the heavy lifting, not the pause. And over time, as those 3 skills, flexibility, frustration tolerance, problem solving, actually get built, you need the pauses less and less. Not because your child is more afraid of consequences, because they can now do what you were trying to punish them into doing. So those 3 pieces, the won't versus can't reframe. Kids do well if they can, and if they're not, there's a missing skill, not a missing motivation. What timeout actually does, delivers social pain without the cognitive tools to process it. And the research signal is mostly coming from warmth, not the timeout itself. And the 3-step conversation, empathy, concern, invitation, done in calm moments, which builds the actual skill the behavior is missing. Your child isn't choosing to melt down. They're missing a skill. And skills don't get built through consequences. They get built through conversation, connection, and a tiny plan for next time. Save this for the next waffle morning. Send it to a parent who's been doing timeouts and quietly wondering if they're working. If this made something click, hit like. It genuinely helps other parents find the channel. And if you want more of the brain science behind raising small humans, subscribe. New episode every week. Next episode, what the zoomies actually are in a toddler's brain. What looks like chaos is a very specific nervous system reset that works when words can't. We'll unpack exactly why movement does the job,